Once you have the basic geometry like walls, floors, and roofs in place in your model, you will begin the steady process of refining the model as the design progresses. In many cases, you will find the need to cut holes in these elements like simple passageways through walls, shafts for floors, elevators and equipment in floors, and skylights and dormers and roofs. In some cases, you will find it easiest to edit the sketch of the element in question to represent such penetration. This approach would work well for floors, which represent double volume spaces, for example. In other cases, you might use an opening object to actually cut through the solid geometry. So in this movie, we're going to explore a few examples of opening objects, and I'm going to start with a shaft opening, and the file I have open here on screen is called shaft. Now, the opening objects are on the Architecture tab. You can find them here on the Opening panel. We're not going to do all 5 opening types, but we are going to look at a couple of these. And again, I'm going to start with the shaft opening. Now, let me set the stage here first. I'm in a view called Section 2 here, and this section is cutting through the elevator shaft of my building. And let's just get a closer look here. Let me zoom in a little bit on a couple of these floors here. And what you'll see is the floor slab here goes all the way through on each level. Clearly, that would make it a little difficult for our elevator cab to travel through there. Our 2 options for dealing with that would be to select the floor, go to Edit Boundary. Because I'm not in a floor plan view, Revit would alert me of that fact and ask me for a floor plan that I wanted to open up, like Level 2. And then in that floor plan, I would have to draw the shape of the hole that I wanted to cut through that space, and I could do that with a simple rectangle, for example. I'll just answer no for that question. When I finish that and I go back to the section, that would, in fact, cut the hole in there. But the trouble is that only worked for the one floor that I had selected. So what I'm going to do here is reverse all of that with my undo command, and I'm going to instead use a shaft opening. The advantage that the shaft opening has is it's a separate sketch-based object that we draw it once and then we adjust the height of it, and it will cut through every object in its path. So let's go to the first floor plan here to get started, Level 1, and I'm going to zoom in on the elevator area, and I want to create the shaft in that area right there. So I'll click Shaft. That takes me to sketch mode. We've talked about sketch mode quite a bit already, and I can really draw this thing using any of the methods. I could use pick walls or just draw a rectangle. In this case, I'm going to just draw a simple rectangle, and I'm going to start right here at the intersection of those 2 walls and go over here to the intersection of these 2 walls. Now, with these lock icons, I can even lock this sketch, and the advantage of that will be if any of those walls move, this sketch will actually adjust. The potential disadvantage of doing that is if one of those walls moves in such a way that the sketch can't stay attached, it might generate an error message. So just be careful about locking your sketches. But in this case, I'll go ahead and do it. I'm going to click Finish here. And to see the result of that, I need to go back to the section view. I'll go to Section 2 here. And interestingly enough, the shaft actually ended up sort of in the middle of the space there. Either using the settings here on the Properties palette, the level constraints and heights, or these little grips, I can make adjustments to that height. So what I'm going to do is make the base constraint start at Level 1. Let's apply that and see what that does. You see how that'll pull it down there. And then the top constraint here is already up to Level 3. That seems to do the trick. And if I deselect the shaft, you can see the result. We now have a nice clean space through here. The walls pass through cleanly, and the elevator can pass through that shaft there. So the shaft opening is a void opening, okay? And it cuts through everything in its path. I'd like to look at another example. I'd like to look at the dormer example. It's a similar kind of thing. So I've got another file open here in the background called dormer. It's just a really simple little building here. I've got a hip roof, and then I've got a small little gable roof here, and then these 3 little walls right here which make up the dormer assembly. So the first step of creating a dormer is to just build the actual geometry that will represent the dormer. What I want to do now is actually create a hole. I'm going to select all of this stuff and temporarily hide it with my sunglass icon down here. And you can see that there's no hole in the roof beyond. So let me reset the temporary hide isolate. And so that's going to be what this dormer opening tool is going to do for me. It's going to allow me to build that hole in the other roof. Now, the first step is this roof is not touching the back roof. So I want to join these two together. There's a tool for that. I go to the Modify tab and I click on the Join Unjoin Roof tool. It's prompting me to select an edge at the end of the roof. I can pick either one of these, and then the plane I want to attach it to, and it'll just extend that roof back and attach it. Then I go to the Architecture tab, and I can create my dormer opening. So I'm going to click the tool, and the first question that it's asking me is to select the roof that's going to be cut by this opening, and it's going to be this roof. Now that'll take me into a kind of sketch mode, and this is similar to other objects we've seen, that it has this pick option right here. I can pick the edges of roofs and walls. So if I pick this roof, it draws that little V shape. And if I pick these walls, you can see that it will create those little sketch shapes over here. Now if I zoom in slightly, this sketch line went to the inside face of the other wall there. So I'm going to click my Modify tool to cancel out of that mode, select this, and I'm just going to flip it to the other side, and then I'll use my Trim command to trim up these corners. So like other sketches, this has to be an enclosed shape. When I click Finish, I'll get this error message. Now this can be a little scary looking message here. Everything turned orange on screen and it says it can't continue. But what it's actually talking about is not really the dormer at all. What it's talking about is the wall out here, the exterior wall that's attached to the underside of the roof. The remedy is listed right here. I can unjoin the elements. I'm going to go ahead and do that. Now you can see the dormer is nice and clean. It's all done. If I select these elements here with a window selection like we did a few moments ago, and I do hide element, you can see we've got our nice little hole cut through the roof there. Let me reset that. Where the trouble is, if I open up a section that cuts through this dormer, I'm going to open up section 2. You can see the dormer condition over here. Let's zoom in on it. This was really where the problem was. So the wall up here is kind of in the same general location as this wall over here. So you could either join those walls together, or what I'm going to actually do in here is I'm going to tab into this wall and select it. And I'm just going to use the temporary dimension here to make that about 3'9". That'll pull that wall back slightly, and then I can select this wall and reattach it to the underside of the roof, and it kind of takes care of the problem. If you want to, you could adjust the overhang of the roof and so on. So there's a couple quick examples of a few of the opening objects we have. A shaft opening will cut through any horizontal slab or roof that it finds in its path. You can adjust the heights in order to have its effect be more broad. A dormer opening is a very specific kind of opening, specifically for cutting dormers into roof slabs. And I encourage you to explore some of these other openings on your own. We've got simple vertical openings and wall openings. They all kind of work the same way. They're a void object that intersects with the solid object and cuts the form away. But the really nice thing about these void objects is, because they're separate objects, you can modify them later and they will reapply themselves automatically to the surrounding geometry.